Happy Monday, folks. We're all here. I'm after a rather tiring week last week, 3 times driving up and down the QEW and having to withstand the delays of the GO train on Saturday. But I'll be here for most of the week this week, and we'll be doing shows all 5 days, hopefully. Let's start with our pre-show. Russ, you had something to go?
Yeah, I wanted to mention there was a game yesterday. Sometimes on Facebook, I could be a wise guy, and I've got a friend who's part of the.
Yeah,
he's part of the Fox. I played softball with this guy, and he's part of the Fox Carolina Panthers coverage. But he grew up an Eagles fan, right? So obviously he was excited to come here. And last week he wrote that, hey, Panthers came up a little short. And so a week ago I said, hey, don't worry. They'll fight back and come back from behind against the Eagles. And literally that's what they did yesterday. They scored 21 points in the fourth quarter to come back from behind. But the bigger story on that game, rather than me being the wise guy, was Doug Peterson after the game sort of saying, well, now the pressure is off. We could just have fun. And you don't get to take the pressure off when you're the world champs. Like no team feels that way, regardless of what your record is. You won last year. They're out to beat you. And the other thing is Carson Wentz has all the pressure on him because he didn't even win the Super Bowl, and he's expected to take him to the Super Bowl or back to the Super Bowl. And so that's the thing that's being talked about most here, and I bet you all around the NFL.
Well, I know that the Tom Brady haters and the Patriot haters were mightily pissed off yesterday. If you watched the game they played in Chicago, it was 38-31 with seconds remaining in the fourth quarter, and Mitch Trubisky throws a Hail Mary at about the 2-yard line, and the Bears receiver catches it, but they tackle him on the 1 to prevent them from tying.
I think 5 guys tackled them.
Yeah, it was a gang tackle, and I know a bunch of people just hate the Patriots and hate Brady, and I'm not one of them because don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of theirs, but they're a great team. He's a great quarterback, and I respect them.
Oh no, I hate them, but that was just a good play. I can't hate on them.
Right.
But I'm amazed no Green Bay fans chimed in and said, "Well, if that had been Rodgers throwing, it would have been a touchdown." Because no one's gotten luckier on Hail Marys than Aaron Rodgers.
True, but Hail Marys these days, very hard to do.
Yeah, and you have to consider, from my point of view, being in Buffalo, and we've had I think 18 quarterbacks in the time span that Brady's been the quarterback of the Patriots, and the latest being the ancient Derek Anderson, who comes in and basically equals or tops Nathan Peterman with 4 turnovers in one of the worst games I've ever watched. 37-5, Indianapolis over Buffalo. Buffalo, Russ, they're a train wreck, but the thing is, they're not unique in the league. Right now, Arizona's got 1 win. I think San Francisco's got a win. They could be the worst team in the league, and they still might not finish with the first pick.
I agree, and nothing makes me happier.
How did the Jets do, by the way?
They lost, but it's okay. They have 3 wins. I wasn't expecting a win. No problem here.
The other
I have a quarterback. I know my quarterback's still healthy.
I think the Bills quarterback. He's got potential, but their offensive line is a turnstile. So it's when you get destroyed every game, and basically bang up your elbow on some defensive lineman's helmet. I mean,
look, be happy with McCoy out with a concussion. You're guaranteed to get that last place now.
Yeah. Well, I wish they would have traded him before this, but not going to happen now. The other non-hockey stuff, and then we'll get talking about the weekend and the status of some of the teams in the league. The World Series was finalized. Now we have Boston Red Sox versus LA Dodgers. First time that the Red Sox and Dodgers have faced each other since 1916, when Babe Ruth was a pitcher and Casey Stengel played for Brooklyn. So I'm not going to predict this, because every time I predicted a series and I said the Red Sox are going to lose, they've pulled a rabbit out of their hat or wherever, and they've won. So I'm gonna say no. I'm not going to pick this and just hope that.
I mean, look, my picks pretty early on were Red Sox and the Brewers, and now that the Brewers are out, I'm going Red Sox. They've been the best team all year. They've proven it. They winning last game with David Price proves that they're the best team, because when you can win with your weakest link, you're going to win.
Peter, maybe I should use reverse psychology and pick the Red Sox, because since I picked the Yankees and the Astros in the American League, maybe I should pick the Red Sox and just, that'll guarantee a Dodgers victory.
Do that, Mike. It's fine.
Yeah. The other one little hockey thing, that just the ultimate in irony. There have been players in Toronto that have raised the ire of the fan base, especially when people believe that this player should be playing when Mike Babcock doesn't. And one of them was Frankie Corrado, who Lou Lamoriello picked up off of waivers from the Vancouver Canucks. And for most of his, I think almost 2 years in Toronto, Mike Babcock refused to put him in the lineup. Well, he got traded to Pittsburgh, had an injury, was with Pittsburgh for a couple years. And now, lo and behold, the Toronto Marlies have signed Frankie Corrado. So
just a never-ending saga, man.
Now, it's an AHL contract, and the whole problem with him was they knew they didn't think he would get through waivers, and that's why he sat basically in the press box for over a year. But here he's already in the American Hockey League, and he can't get called up unless he gets signed to an NHL contract. So that's not going to be a factor. Here he's coming up.
This is like the greatest story ever told for like his grandkids. How I was a Leaf and got paid a lot of money and never really played for him.
Yeah, and that's happened with a couple other players too.
I wish I had a career like that.
Yeah, give me $925,000 on an entry-level deal. I'll sit in the press box. How I do it? No, never mind. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, October 22nd, 2018.
I'm Peter Tessier in Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm severely balding Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. And I say that only because on Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday, they showed a photo, or they shot into the press box to show organist Jimmy Holmstrom playing the national anthem. And myself and another reporter were in camera shot, and it was the perfect angle of myself showing my cue ball on.
This is not like breaking news, so
No, but it was embarrassing. It's like, of course,
when I walk around the press box, that's how I walk around the press box.
The first time I'm on Hockey Night in Canada, it's like my male pattern baldness. Anyway, okay. Now let's talk. There is and we've talked about the William Nylander saga over and over. But we have, there's some sort of fresh news on the situation. First of all, on Saturday, the indication from some of the insiders on Hockey Night in Canada, namely Elliot Friedman and Chris Johnston, was that the chances of a long-term deal are basically dead. That's not shocking, because apparently Nylander and his representatives are still looking for that $8 million figure in a long-term deal, and that's not going to happen. So the focus seems to be switching towards the bridge deal.
Maybe.
But now the curious thing, and this is where the information is getting interesting here. Kyle Dubas was spotted at the Rangers Calgary Flames game in New York on Sunday. And that comes off of earlier this week, two Rangers scouts being at a Leafs game in Toronto. I think it was against the LA Kings. So, that having two scouts, like when it gets closer to the deadline there.
Do we know which two scouts?
I do.
No, but was one of them a pro scout?
Yes.
Okay. See, that's what matters in this situation.
Yeah, and yes, and one of them was the regular area scout, who I think is Toronto-based.
Scouts there, and they're not playing them. That's what matters,
right? And I don't think they're playing them anytime soon. So it's not like a scout, not like they're scouting lines and tactics and everything like that. Now Dubas goes to New York, and he's at the game, but according to Pierre LeBrun, Louis Gross, who's Nylander's agent, who represents Johnny Gaudreau, who was there for the only time this year since the Flames were in New York, was at the game. And there was a discussion before the game, and now Chris Johnston from Sportsnet reported about an hour ago that Gross and Dubas will be meeting today to discuss Nylander. Now, if a bridge deal gets done, a bridge deal gets done. I think that's likely, but I can't ignore the possibility and the connection here between the Rangers and the Leafs and Dubas being there and the potential of there being a trade. And what I asked Russ was, okay, let's put together what kind of trade makes sense if the Rangers are interested in Nylander and the Leafs are willing to trade him. You would assume a defenseman will be part of this deal.
Yeah, and think about it. I mean, the Rangers can pay Nylander $8 million. They can. They probably paid Michael $8 million to be Jaromir Jagr's sidekick in the 90s. So this wouldn't be anything new for Glenn Sader, really. I know he's not the GM, but he's still lurking, right? So there's all of this that goes on. So I looked at it, and we know the Rangers won't give up Brady Shea, but I still contend that Shattenkirk could be a very useful guy for the Leafs. And if you get Shattenkirk, it does move other guys down. And so that helps too, because then you don't have what's his name playing
Ron Hainsey.
Ron Hainsey playing more minutes than he needs to. And then it gets interesting because, it could be any one of three forwards if we're going to balance this deal out, because I think the Rangers get some sort of draft pick in the on the other end from the Leafs because they have a bunch of picks. It could be, Matt Zuccarello. It could be Jimmy Vesey. It could be Elias Anderson. Like, it just depends what is given back and what teams are looking for. And because I think at the end of the day, the Rangers have realized that short of Kravtsov, who again is not lighting up the KHL, and I think we talked about that the other day, Mike, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so he's, who they're hoping is an elite talent. Nobody else there is really an elite talent. And if you give Nylander enough minutes, he certainly could get 75 points in a year.
Right.
That's more than really anybody's going to get on the Rangers, maybe short of Zibanejad on a career year. So they still kind of need that to move forward. And you don't know what will happen with Panarin, but they'd still have the money to get Panarin too. That's the thing of it.
Peter, I mean, when I was talking to Russ earlier, it's like, okay, and I agree. I don't see any way that that Jeff Gorton trades Brady Shea because he's got Shea locked up at around 5.5, 5.25, 5.5. Yeah, just signed this summer, and that's a good price point for a young defenseman. He's locked up long term, and he's probably going to be their number one or number two defenseman if he isn't already. Shattenkirk, we know that he was scratched as a healthy scratch earlier in the year. He's a right-hand shot. That makes a lot of sense. He's under contract for another 2 years at $6.65 million. I think that's a little pricey.
Well, the Rangers will eat some of that.
The Rangers might have to eat some of that, and based on what would potentially go on with the Leafs having to sign Marner and Matthews, and if they could get a little bit of a haircut on that. But I also think, specifically VC, the Leafs, the one thing that Babcock, and I know this for a fact, he loves players with size, and there's very little size on the Leafs, very little snarl. Nazem Kadri will do it every once in a while. Marlowe's a bigger guy, but he's getting up there in age. VC is a power forward winger with a scoring touch. Now, he hasn't scored 20 or 30 for the Rangers.
15, 17 goals. That's
right. But playing with Matthews or Tavares, I think he could easily score over 20. So if that was the type of package where they got the defensive help and they got a young forward, that's the type of deal I think that would help the Leafs and would help the Rangers too.
Here's the thing about, like, there's a match here if you want it to be. The question is, are the Rangers taking Nylander, if this were to go down, are they taking Nylander because, well, we can afford to pay him what he wants, therefore he'll want to play here? Because if that's your logic.
But that works in New York, Peter. That's always worked.
Well, look, and I also, and Russ, I've said before that if you're going to have someone play in New York, you probably have to pay a little more because you're living in New York. It's
right.
Bloody expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Like, it's insane. It's kind of like Vancouver in the same way.
Yes.
You're at like $6,000 a month for your all furnished leased apartment if you can find one, right? Like, let alone trying to own property there. So it's a whole other ball game.
Right.
So it works there, but does it work in the bigger strategy? It might. I'm just not sure it's it changes the dynamic. It moves the goalpost for the Rangers unless it fits in with other moves or other things they're going to have assets come. If this is a standalone move to say we can acquire William Nylander, we can afford to pay him, what else do we need to do to change the trajectory of the team here? Well, and they've got to be very careful about what goes back, because I don't think William Nylander is enough of a player to change the Rangers trajectory, considering what you're going to have to give going the other way, right? It's a give and take. Is there a plethora of assets at defense? No, they're solid, but the one anyone wants isn't going anywhere. So as Russ said, it's Shattenkirk. And do the Leafs want to take on Shattenkirk's contract? How many, 2 more years?
2 more years at 6.65, but
6.65.
But this is the
that
thing,
also.
Peter.
What's that?
This is the thing.
Yeah, that also squeezes the room Dubas needs later on.
No, but the Rangers could eat a few mil each year. They got plenty of cap space.
And what it also does is it basically, I mean, and I wrote something for Sporting News that'll be posting in a little bit. It basically ends the suspense regarding Jake Gardiner, because if you're acquiring Shattenkirk, then Shattenkirk is your Gardiner replacement after this year. You can afford both of them right now because they have tons of cap space. But then next year, if Gardiner is going to be looking for a similar type deal than Shattenkirk, in the 6.5 range, they're not going to assign him to that deal. And because they're already paying Shattenkirk, I continue to think that's where they're going to go. They're going to add somebody at the deadline, not as a rental, but as somebody who has a year or 2 left in a contract. So that guy is there to replace Gardiner, because Gardiner is going to hit the jackpot.
Here's why I question this is why I questioned Dubas was in New York to hammer out a deal, because he flew to Sweden to try and hammer out a deal, and
Switzerland,
sorry, and the agent wasn't there.
Yeah, it was strictly a meeting with William and his dad.
Right, and so I don't know if he actually would take that extra step to go to New York after that just to hammer out the deal. Like, again, I don't think the Rangers sent these scouts for no reason either. I think I think the backup plan is, hey, we hope we can get Nylander on the bridge deal. But for some reason, if that talk didn't go well, I think the talk of, hey, let's make this deal could be there, because I think that seems logical.
I also think, and I said this last week and I'll say it again, I think that if the final solution to this whole scenario is Nylander signing a bridge deal, that's the last deal he's ever signing with the Leafs, because I cannot see Dubas and Leaf management having to deal with Michael Nylander again with even more of a resume of another year or 2 of points to establish a price point. So I think that if they do sign him for 2 years, he will not last that contract. So anyway, let's move off of this and talk about first, Russ. Over the weekend, I was a little surprised. I didn't know if there was a long-term illness here, but Charles Wang, the former owner, and wasn't he was still partial owner? Didn't he have like a percentage?
Yeah, he had a small percentage.
Yeah, he passed away at the age of 74, and I know that John Tavares went to social media and said, something really nice about Charles Wang, who was the owner for the Islanders for most of his tenure on Long Island and in Brooklyn. But I'm sure Islander fans sort of look at Wang's tenure as owner with sort of mixed emotions, because the team. The ownership situation, the moving to Brooklyn, the stagnation of the franchise, the uncertainty of the franchise. I mean, yeah, it's not all roses when it came to Charles Wang and the Islanders.
No, I think the number one thing is he kept the team there. Okay, he was a rich guy that kept the team there. When I was in the business world, I certainly knew of Computer Associates, and so that's he's always going to be respected for that, and I think he'll be respected. But I also think he'll be remembered for the Alexei Yashin deal, for Mike Milbury being his guide, and a horrible guide. Like, that would be like, running a seeing eye dog into the wall. But he ran 2 teams for him. Again, remember, Milbury also ran the arena football team, and that didn't do well. So that's how much faith Charles Wang had in him, which, again, that was just that terrible luck there. The DiPietro deal will always be remembered because it's maybe the worst deal in hockey history. The fact that Charles Wang tried to get Alexei Yashin to come back while they were still paying him, but he wasn't there when things were going bad will be remembered. And then the Brooklyn deal is like this. The Lighthouse Project, I get it. I get why you wanted it. It got close. Long Island politics stink, though, right? But there was a bailout point for the Lighthouse Project when Brooklyn said, hey, let's build this purpose facility and have the Islanders in it. And the Islanders never got back to them in any kind of time. And when that didn't happen, they got away from the multi-sport facility and they built it just for basketball and then sort of retrofitted it after the fact. And so that downside of the Islanders was the downside of the Lighthouse Project. So there's probably an equal amount of good and bad here.
I think Charles Wang is a guy who'll probably be remembered for having a lot of misplaced faith.
Yes.
And I think he was honest in his belief in people to his own fault. It cost him a lot of time and money for all the reasons you want in someone of belief and support. And I think he tried to take a page out of what the Pittsburgh Steelers have done with their belief in head coaches and not reactionary, with staying true to a process. It's just that he was a little bit out of his league. He maybe threw his support behind people who weren't willing to understand what they had in an owner like Mr. Wang. And it's a little unfortunate that, his legacy will be looked at through some, over time through some pretty harsh lenses. But there was no denying he was prepared to try something different to see if it worked. And, the precursor to things like, had DiPietro actually had the DiPietro deal actually gone to Luongo, would anyone be complaining about it? No. Right? Like,
no, but it didn't even get to a point where it could go long.
Yeah. No. I know all I'm saying, Russ, is that I think it's his legacy is going to be a wonderful thing. But I think if you saw what Tavares tweeted, the guy, he wanted to believe in people and he wanted to believe in something for the good. He just didn't have the right people to believe in, I think. And that's the unfortunate thing.
Yeah, and I mean, the DiPietro contract was undone by the fact that he was injury prone even before they signed it. I mean, he was a good goaltender, but then
injury prone.
He had a couple injuries before that big contract extension.
Nothing major though.
Yeah, but and then
here's what I'll also say about Wang. At the end of the day, misplaced faith is one thing, Peter, but he still was a businessman, and he didn't notice that he was in the wrong business until it was too late.
Yeah. All right, let's start with I wanted to check some of the teams that are trending up, trending down in each conference, and unlike most times, we'll start with the West because sometimes we give short shrift to the West. Nashville is 7-1 right now, so they're rocking. But they had we're gonna see how good UC Saros is, Russ, because Pekka Rinne was injured and is now on injured reserve. I think it was Ekholm fell into him, and it looked like a groin injury. I didn't hear any. I just heard lower body, but he's on the IR, and now they've called up Miroslav Svoboda as the backup, which means UC Saros is probably starting every game or every game possible until Rinne gets back. This is the opportunity because, I mean, there have been doubters and a couple on this webcast whether, Saros can be a number one, and this will be his chance.
Yeah, there's no question this will be his chance. But again, I saw a tweet the other day from Stan Fischler after Pekka Rinne got hurt. And I'm trying to find the tweet, but he basically was saying and asking the question and sort of saying, hey, is it the butterfly goalie situation that we're seeing all these injuries now? And the answer is no. The answer is not the butterfly goalie because Patrick Waugh was a butterfly goalie. He rarely got hurt. Brodeur was not a butterfly goalie, so we leave him out of it. Most guys in this era get hurt because guys are crashing the crease, and when they do it, they're much bigger and stronger than they were in the old days. So this isn't anything on Rinne, and it's not anything on Rinne being a butterfly goalie. And when I see something like a tweet like that, I just think, boy, that's really, old school, antiquated thinking, and This is something that is going to hurt Nashville. I think they're going to fall a little in the standings, not tremendously, but I think they will fall a little. And we don't know what Pecorine is going to come back like, which Pecorine they're going to get after this injury either. And that could really affect their season.
Yeah, and the other major injury to a goaltender this year was Matt Murray, and that was either his teammate or somebody that his teammate pushed into him and landed on him. So that's what happens now. That's what happens when you're not allowing like defensemen to clear the crease in front of the net, and now they shove somebody, but when you shove them into your own goaltender, you risk your goaltender being hurt. Or when you try to push somebody out and you fall over your goaltender, that happens.
Yeah, but that was coming in at speed and a weird angle too. Like
Yes.
It was coming sort of across, like, so this, you want to play it this way. What if you want to go back to the clutch and grab era, and which slowed things down so that things like this didn't happen as much, injuries and different sorts. That's the alternative, right?
Yes.
I think this is more of a freak thing, maybe a little more because Rene's a little older. Certainly didn't seem to hurt him against Edmonton though. They came out and played and did just fine.
Now Colorado is a couple points behind Nashville, 5-1-2, 12 points. The surprising thing for us is they've only given up 19 goals in 8 games. For that team, for the team that we've seen a couple for the last few years, struggling with their goaltending, struggling with their defense. We noted doing our previews that the Colorado defense, with the addition of Ian Cole, with Zadorov, gaining experience, with the addition of Girard, and to add to Johnson and Barry, that their defense is no longer a weak spot. And we know the talent that they have up front. This team could be a team to be reckoned with.
Yeah, they definitely could be. And they're coming into Philly tonight, and Varlamov is undefeated. Maybe Varlamov, and he started doing better last year when the team got better. And so maybe, the getting Grubauer lit a little fire under him. And boy, he's got a .948 save percentage and a 1.77 goals against. Like, this is the Varlamov of a few years ago when he really was a top guy. And he's never been a top guy for long, right? Because injuries usually derailed him. But if he can stay healthy this season with that team they have, with their defense, with the way they move the puck, with the way that we always say Rantanen's one of the unheralded stars in the league, this could really be good. I mean, Kerfoot, they've got a lot of things. They've got a penalty kill. They've got a good power play. There's a lot of things on this team to like. And again, nobody talks about Joe Sakic anymore. Nobody, except for saying good things.
That trade made him.
Yeah.
It really did. Now, Peter, Winnipeg is 5-2-1, 11 points. What's the feeling there? I mean, is it basically we're happy with the way they're going, or there are concerns?
Their top line, top two lines are still having some challenges playing the defensive side of the game. Wheeler and Scheifele have been, although there's been some production here in them, they have not been themselves in terms of some play. Certainly not on the in their own zone. A lot of weird mistakes happening. Some very unnecessary penalties taken by both of them. I saw a stat the other day. I can't recall it, but Wheeler, Scheifele, and like 3 other guys have combined for something like 24 minutes in penalties, whereas the guys you think who would take penalties have combined for 8. It's really weird. It's very uncharacteristic. Scheifele is known as a player who draws penalties. Instead, he's been taking them. They're optimistic. I think there's some still having Bufflin come back in the lineup after missing 2 games really solidifies some puck movement. It pushed Josh Morrissey up to the number 1 unit on the power play, and he's absolutely excelled. He is playing some ferociously good hockey right now. And he had a goal on Sunday. Beautiful setup after Connor and Scheifele did some nice work on the boards. Trouba had 3 assists. Those guys are starting to come into form. That's a good sign. It's just they need to get the rest of the top 2 lines sort of playing a better 200-foot game, and the Jets could start sort of looking like how people want them to look.
In the other division, the Anaheim Ducks are leading the Pacific with 11 points, but this may be a little bit of smoke and mirrors here, because the reason that they're in first place is John Gibson. They're getting outshot. There was a period last week against, I think it was Dallas, where in the second period they were outshot 30-3. They were up 3-1, and then I think Dallas had 3 goals. But John Gibson had to face 30 shots in one period, and it's now. And yesterday I think it was Gibson that played against the Sabres, and they had Buffalo had 44 shots on goal. So this is the Randy Carlyle thing, Russ. I mean, in Toronto they gave up tons of shots. There's a lot of talent there. We know that they have really good defensemen in Lindholm and Fowler and Montour, and now Getzlaf is back and Kessler is playing, but you're not going to survive for long if you're giving up 40 shots a night.
No, they don't really have shot suppressors or shot blockers, and they used to. And so that's something where I think they're missing a little bit. Now that Richie's back, their offense could get a little hot, and Sam Steele got his first NHL goal. And so, it's possible they could still do that. It'd be a year after I picked them, which would make sense because, that's how it usually goes. But I think there's a little smoke and mirrors here. But again, I'm not surprised that Gibson's doing this well. I mean, I always thought he was a top goalie. But even this is better than I would have expected him to do because this is just too many shots for anybody to face, really.
Yeah, and Calgary's in second place in the division with 10 points and 1 point behind Anaheim, and also the Vancouver Canucks, Peter, 5-3, 10 points, and the news came out this morning that Elias Pettersson is on the ice and may play sometime this week. So that concussion from the Matheson hit doesn't be having long-term effects.
He was skating for 20 minutes on Saturday. Hockey Night Canada did a little thing on him. Yeah. Interesting. And I watched a fair bit of the Canucks Bruins game because I hadn't really had a chance to sit down and watch since I saw them play the Jets. And the Canucks, they're getting some luck in some ways, and they're kind of riding it a bit. I don't know if what they're doing is sustainable, but if they get Pettersson back on, they may not be as bad as people thought they would be, which is probably the wrong thing for the Vancouver Canucks given what's at stake in the draft, right? But I mean, again, you shake your head at the planning stage here because
welcome to Toronto West. This is what they did 10 years ago. You signed
Travis Green. I think Travis Green is one of those coaches because he's a fairly young coach in the league. You really can't expect him to lose.
No,
but you can put a roster in place that says,
I know
we're going to let you can do what the Jets did with Paul Maurice and say, you don't have to win, you have to teach.
Right. And that's why the moves in the summer and the moves the previous summer made absolutely. You don't add Antoine Roussel. You don't add Jay Beagle. You don't sign Del Zotto.
You think of problems, Mike, and that's the other part of this equation. Is it's not like the Leafs, who didn't matter if the team was horrible, fans were still going to show up. That's not the case for the Canucks fans.
Well, it is. They still. I mean, they're not the Leafs, no, and in that capacity, no one is. There's only one other team like that, and that's the Habs and maybe the Rangers,
and not even the Rangers anymore.
That's it. The Canucks aren't far off. Like they'll still get 16,000 people paid admission. Whether they're all sitting in the seats is another thing, right?
Yeah,
that's the difference. It's paid attendance, not attendance butts in the stands. They'll weather it. I mean, all Vancouver fans, because no one's from Vancouver, they're fickle. So all they need is a simple sense of hope, and they'll be back in those seats in no time. And Pettersson's probably it. But it'd be better if they had Pettersson and the Hughes brothers too next year, and then you imagine what would happen.
Yeah.
Now 16th in attendance, just over 18,000, which is still okay. But for a Canadian market, it's a little soft, and I think that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, in the if you have to step off, Peter, we can just we'll cover it for a few minutes. Now Chicago is the last team I had in sort of the trending up category because I think they exceeded their expectations a little bit. They're 4-2-2. They're in a wild card spot right now with 10 points. But the one thing that stands out, Russ, is 32 goals against. Now, Crawford is just coming back. I know that Cam Ward played yesterday in the loss to Tampa Bay. I don't know how much Crawford can cut into that because I think it's more a defensive problem in terms of the players in front of them because I think they're going all out offensively. They're flying around with DeBrincat and Taves and Kane.
Hold on. Let's not even gloss over this with DeBrincat. This is the most underreported story in the league. He's 7 goals in 8 games. Like, if this were coming out of Toronto or New York or Montreal, this would be like one of the top stories. But it's a small guy in Chicago, so it's like, Alex DeBrincat,
I honestly, I have to toot our own horns here because it's not like we said this after the fact. When I was going around to junior OHL games before the 2016 draft, because I knew the Leafs had 2 first-round picks. I never knew that they were going to finish with the win the Austin Matthews sweepstakes. And I was looking at who they might take with that last first-round pick that they ended up trading for Freddie Anderson. And they had the top pick in the second round. And I looked at DeBrincat playing with Erie and him scoring 50 goals for the second time in a row. And you said, he's a star with star talent. And he slips into the middle of the second round where the Blackhawks. And as soon as the Blackhawks picked him, I said to you that day that, 2 years from now, we're going to be saying, how the hell did this guy slip to in the 30s? And already, here you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's just he's got 11 points. I mean, he's doing better than we thought. We knew he would be a factor this year. He was a factor last year. I'm actually looking it up. Hang on, I'm looking to see. I have it right here. My final rankings to see where I ranked him.
I think you ranked him in the teens.
I ranked him 20th.
Yeah, I was gonna say you ranked him in the teens. I thought, but 20.
I had him teens for a little while, and then it settled out at 20.
Yeah.
Boy, whoever went 20th, they would have been happy if I picked him at 20th for them.
Well, I mean, just from the Leaf perspective, and because I was a big fan of DeBrincat, and they took Igor Korshkov, the first pick in the second round, and he has yet to play a game in the NHL, and he's currently injured and hasn't played and won't play until December. And he was supposed to come over this year and hasn't. I mean, I'm just saying, it's like, this is a guy, he did great for Russia at the World Junior, but DeBrincat was great for 2 years in the OHL. And I just don't know how somebody could pass him up.
And Yokoharu's been more than I could have expected too. Early on in his career, I had him pegged as a first rounder, and so right now that's really helping him. I don't know if it's sustainable.
It's only if Crawford can really stand on his head, and I think you're asking a lot from a guy who's been out for the last 3 or 4 months of NHL regular season time. Because Glass and Anton Forsberg, who got placed on waivers this morning, they played the majority of the games, and now Cam Ward's played the majority at the beginning of the season. So now let's talk about the downward trends in the West. And the first one is the Los Angeles Kings. The Los Angeles Kings are brutal right now. And that is not an overstatement.
No,
they are, they got their clocks cleaned by the Sabres on Saturday, and afterward, apparently, GM Rob Blake and the players had a team meeting. I'm not saying that they're going to blow it up, because they can't. But the problem is with this team, Russ, I don't know how much you can do to shake things up, because you've got a lot of veteran guys with long-term contracts with big money that wouldn't be easy to move if they decided to do that. So I think they're just trying to shake things up and get things going, because they really don't have a lot of room to maneuver.
Yeah, I covered John Stevens for a long time, and the one thing about John Stevens, he's a very good X's and O's guy, but he puts his belief in players, like Carter and other guys, and if those players aren't doing it, then he loses a big part of what makes him a good coach. And the damning thing on this team right now is Alex Iafallo is their leading scorer. Now, he's got 7 points in 8 games, which, again, great pick by Michael Fuda. I just have to say, he was signed. He was a free agent. He wasn't even a pick, right?
Yeah, I think he was a free agent. Yeah.
Signed free agent. This guy is came up big last year, coming up bigger this year. So, good for their scouting department. Kovalchuk is 5 points in 8 games. Carter is 5 and 8. Toffoli 5 and 8. Doughty 5 and 8, but then you got Muzzin. Kopitar has 2 goals.
Yeah, the funny thing was Kopitar came back from that really bad year 2 years ago and had a good year last year. They've only got 15 goals in 8 games. That's less than 2 a game.
I mean, I still question why Trevor Lewis is still on this team. I get he was on the Stanley Cup team, but he does perform okay in the playoffs, but he's got like a goal in 8 games. Like, there's slowness on this team, and there's some dead wood on this team. And those top 5, 6 guys that you're expecting to score have to really come through. And when Kopitar's not, you're in the spot you're in.
Yeah, and the other team that and you can't really avoid it in terms of their struggles is the Arizona Coyotes, second year in a row under Rick Tocchet, getting off to a slow start. Now, last year, I don't think they got their first win until November. It was something like that. It was a really, really late October or early November. This year, they're 2-5, 4 points. They've only given up 17. They're second in the West in goals against, only 17 goals against. They've only scored 11 goals. They're averaging like, I think it's a 1.3 or 1.4 a game. And that, Russ, that you're not going to win. Even if Antti Ranta is standing on his head, you're not going to win with that.
No, I mean, again, we know that Ranta's a good goalie. He may not be a great goalie, but he's a good goalie in this league. They need to get offense, and they're just not getting it. And they have talent on that team. When you watch them play, there's a skill level that's pretty high, but there's also a fanciness that I didn't like on their power play. And I saw that against Winnipeg, where it was like, game was late. You guys are playing a little too fancy. You really need to sort of reel it in and just play a little more hard nose and just get the pucks on net and try and score from there. Dvorak is a big loss because he was just coming back from injury, got tripped up in a practice, and now tore his pectoral. And yet, what is that? That's their second line center, third line center. So that's a big loss for them. All that said, I think Rick Tocchet's back on the hot seat. This is another slow start for this team, and you can't keep. And again, the young talent is going to put more pressure on Rick Tocchet than anything else.
And you're just getting Galchenyuk back from injury now, and so you were hoping to get Dvorak back. I mean, that's the thing, Peter. I was just saying, Arizona's got 11 goals in 7 games.
Yeah,
and
that's 3 of those came on Sunday. Right? Like,
wow.
Here's the thing about it was interesting watching them. Look, Clayton Keller does not get enough press. Let's just be like, if he was playing in the East, people would see him more. That kid is a very impressive hockey team. But right now, Tocchet's they're a one-trick pony, and they're a puck pressure team. And then after that, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say bad things about Rick Tocchet. I just don't know if he's the kind of coach who's come up the right way and has spent the time teaching young guys and working with young teams and teaching things and habits. Okay, and that word is really critical, habits. You have to teach the right habits. You have to teach the right things, not the tactics, not the strategy, not the big picture, but the habits that teams need to have to be successful that translate from an individual level to a team level. And I think there's probably a better coach for that team given what's on it, because there is a lot of talent there. There really is. But man, I just don't know if Tocchet's the guy to really turn it into what it could be.
Well, and again, and like a lot of coaches, the blind spot for Zach Ronaldo and the blind spot for Nick Cousins, like, these guys aren't everyday NHLers. They're just not. Yeah. And when you can't score goals, you can't have those guys in the lineup just because they're fast or just because someone can penalty kill. You actually have to concentrate on scoring goals here. And to me, that's a big problem. I was just going to look and see how one of their acquisitions was doing. Richard Panik, who I didn't like as an acquisition.
Yeah, that was a salary. To me, that was a salary dump from the Blackhawks.
But he's still an acquisition, and he's got 1 point. He's got 1 point.
Richard Panik was a 4th liner with Tampa Bay. He was a 4th liner with Toronto.
Now you're stuck with him for how many years?
Well, he signed that contract after you played on the left wing with Taves and got 20 goals. So that that's why I said it was a salary dump, because they realized he was not that good.
But I'm saying, but you're Arizona. You're stuck with him now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I think it's something like $2.8 million for. Let's see here, Richard Panik. Yeah, 2.8 million. Then he's a UFA, so it's only for this year, and that helps them get to the cap floor, which was in the past was always a consideration for them.
Like here's the thing: Clayton Keller's up top with 5 points, and again, just like last year, we say anywhere near a point a game on this team when the team is going this bad is amazing because you can only do so much yourself.
Yeah,
Vinny Hinostroza is actually their third leading scorer, and Jordan Osterley is their fourth leading scorer. Like it's just bad.
Yeah, and Michael Grabner was a free agent signing. So yeah, I mean that's now let's transition to the East. The Sabres. I thought
just so because you mentioned Grabner, he's got 1 point. No.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's great on breakaways until he has to score.
Yep.
The Sabres are 5-4-0. They're in a wild card spot in the East, 10 points. They're giving up 25 goals, so they're not. Defensively, they're still, I think, trying to get organized. But one thing, Russ, is that Jeff Skinner has had an impact on this team.
Yeah.
And the question is whether this is a 1-year pit stop and he gets traded at the deadline. But if I was Buffalo, showing what he's
contract now,
yeah, they should be.
They should be because we all kind of knew he was going to have a pretty big impact, and we all still kind of question. Now, again, maybe Jeff Skinner was just finished with Carolina, but
right.
We all kind of questioned why that precipitated, and that's fine. I mean, he's got 5 goals. He's still got great speed. He's still a fairly young guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like if Jeff Skinner doesn't sign with them, he's probably the number 2 free agent on the market next year.
Right.
We're going to say Erik Karlsson's probably going to be number 1 because I don't think he's going to re-sign or sign an extension with the Sharks, right?
Erik Karlsson, Wayne Simmons, Jake Gardner.
Yeah, but I still put Skinner second because he's still.
Based on the fact that he's got 8 years experience and he's 26 years old.
Yeah.
And he can still fly. I mean, his skill set fits in this league. I mean, Peter, I think that Skinner. I mean, Skinner is like one of those stories where I think he's underappreciated because where he played for so long. But I never whenever his name was floated in trade rumors over the last couple of years, I'm like, why? Why would they want to trade this guy?
I know it's totally crazy, but I mean, again, like what have we watched with everything unfold with Carolina in the last while? Like there's a curious thing. The only reason you could I know, like, how often have we talked in the last 2 years about Carolina's plethora and obscene wealth on defense and say, this is how they're going to change things, their lack of center and all the different variables they could use, yet Skinner's the odd guy out. Mm-hmm. It seems incredible, but again, things happen and we all know this. There may be other reasons. Maybe he just said, I've given you everything. I need to be out of this organization. Get him out before that seeps out.
Yeah.
You never know, right? Like,
no, you don't.
Like, you don't know, and it could be for silly things. And would Carolina be doing what they're doing right now if Jeff Skinner was there? That's the other question.
Well, we don't know if they'll do it long term, and I guess we'll get to that at some point. Here's the other thing, though. The last thing about Eichel, I still was talking to a pretty knowledgeable person about the Sabres the other day, and they still felt like they're not seeing the best out of Eichel, and he's a point a game. I just think in that market, for some reason, people and fans have higher expectations than what this player is able to give, and like he's a point a game. What else do you want?
Russ, they were sold 3 years ago on, if you don't win the lottery for McDavid, you've got something just as good, almost as good in Eichel. So they're looking.
That was never true,
right? And that's the prism that they're looking through. They're looking at Eichel as McDavid light, or just as good as Austin Matthews. And don't get me wrong,
I told people in the Austin Matthews draft year, he's better than Eichel. I told them.
I think Eichel is a great player. Do I think he's as good as Austin Matthews? No, I don't. But he's really, really good. And he's, if the Sabres are going to contend in the next few years, he's going to be a big reason for it. I mean, one of the things I think, Casey Middlestat really hasn't gotten going yet, which is a testament to this team right now. There's been a few mentions of maybe him getting sent down to Rochester and let him mature a little more, let him get some.
I don't think they'll do that.
I don't think they're going to do that. But imagine when he does get jump started, when he does start scoring, how that 2-prong attack with Eichel and him, that'll be tough to stop.
You got to remember how young he is. We talked about this at the beginning of the year that it would take him a little while to get used to this league. He wasn't going to be an instant success in this league.
Now, 2 teams where the bubble hasn't burst yet, so I'll give them the credit that they've done well so far, but I'm still not believers in either one. One is the aforementioned Carolina Hurricanes, 4-3-1, 9 points. They've given up 25 goals so far in 8 games, over three goals per game, and that's without Scott Darling, who's apparently
activated today, Mike.
Yeah. Well, no, I thought he was. He's on a conditioning stint in the AHL.
Oh, okay.
I think.
He is activated. He's just on a condition.
Right. He'll be back within a week to 10 days probably, and then they'll have to make a decision on whether they carry 3 goaltenders or put Curtis McElhinney on waivers.
Right.
But the surprising thing here is they're scoring, Russ.
Yeah.
They're scoring goals, and I didn't think that they would.
No, I agree. They're scoring more than I thought they would. I have to give them credit for that. I have to give them credit for somehow getting wins out of this goaltending that still isn't great. Like we can't talk about it as being really solid. It's just like you said, they're giving up 3 goals a game, but they happen to be outscoring that for now. But is that sustainable? Like that's where you say, no, even in this league, if you're expecting to score 3.5 goals a game for the entire season, that's a bridge too far, I think, for the talent that they have. But look, Sebastian Aho is still one of the great unheralded stars in the league. Jacob Slavin is a great unheralded star in this league. Like they have a lot of these guys that don't get their due on a regular basis. I'm still a big Teravainen fan. I always will be because he does so many other things very, very well. We'll see. I'm not quite there with them yet, and we don't know. Like Scott Darling could actually upset what's going on here right now. And look, Aho's got 13 points in 8 games, and Ferland's a point a game, and Teravainen's a point a game. Justin Williams is 7 and 8. Like that's more scoring than we thought they'd have. I'm not surprised about Teravainen. Like I said, I've always been very high on him. But even for Aho, that's higher than we probably thought he could do.
Yeah.
I mean, 4 goals and 9 assists. That's pretty great.
The other bubble that I'm waiting to burst, Peter, is Montreal. Right now they've earned points in 6 of the 7 games. Yeah. They're 4-1-2. Now it's not a surprise that Carey Price would be playing well, but when Price was ill, when he had the flu, it was Antti Niemi who stepped in and played pretty well for a couple games. I don't think this is sustainable. I don't think they have enough offense to support being a contender for a playoff spot. So I think this eventually will peter out. But you got to give them credit right now that they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, look for the teams like the Montreals, the Vancouvers. Who's the other one I'm thinking of too, who shouldn't be where they are right now? Carolina, and stuff. This is kind of neat. They're teams that have underwent some change, made some moves, and maybe they're a little unencumbered, and the pressure valve has sort of popped a little bit. And you always hear coaches say you want your team loose. You want your team sort of feeling that good. And unfortunately, the NHL pressure valve starts at the start of the season now. We all know how important it is those first 10 games. Yeah. And if you're not and then literally the statistics on being out of the playoffs after 10 games and getting back in, particularly because of the tie point or the loser point, if you want to call it, makes things that much harder.
Yeah.
So, it's nice to see whether you like them or not, whether you like the teams or not. I think it's better for the league to have teams, at least in strong markets or even weaker markets, have a chance of success and have a little bit of getting out of the door, getting off the start line fast. Will it continue? Who knows? But it makes for interesting talking and interesting points and some analysis. And, again, with Montreal, like if Carey Price just plays like Carey Price, you got a shot in any game as long as you're doing something right with the puck. Like
Right.
that's the reality of having a goalie like Carey Price. And I don't know if we're seeing Carey Price yet, but we're not seeing the guy we got last year, at least.
But we're also seeing Montreal without Shea Weber, and I know he started
Yeah.
to skate about a week ago. So it probably within the next month you're going to see him back in the lineup. And then it's a question of what Shea Weber are we going to see? If he's the old Shea Weber, then maybe they have a better chance than most people thought to make the playoffs. If he's slowed or if he's not the same player, then I think they're probably going to be on the outside looking in. Now the other team, and I can't say that Detroit is trending down. They're just down. They're the worst team.
No, they're just down.
They're just down. So I'm not going to
won a game, Mike. So we got.
Well, that's where I was going. They have the worst goal differential in the NHL, -17, but they did achieve their first victory of the season in a shootout over and this team is the trending down, the Florida Panthers, who are 5 points, 1, 2, and 3 in 6 games. Again, we can't maybe really accurately evaluate them until Luongo comes back. But the longer Luongo is out and they have to go with Reimer and Hutchinson, the less chance they have of climbing back into the race.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, that's their whole season. But we knew that was going to be their season because everything else on that team's good. But some people in the chat room are suggesting would they trade for a goalie? They're not trading for a goalie because Luongo's going to be back in a week. If Luongo gets hurt a second time and it's longer than that, then they might trade for a goalie. But beyond that, no, they're probably not going to.
Peter, what are your thoughts on the Panthers?
On the Panthers? Man, I'm just sort of – I had to go back, and when you start talking about that, look at the standings. I didn't realize they only had 1 win.
Yeah.
They only played 6 games straight, but yeesh. 25 goals against – mind, that's not Philadelphia bad. The Panthers are such a curious team. Why aren't they better given the talent on that team? What's holding them back from taking that next step? And I think if I'm sitting in that organization and all the jokesters are going to say it's called what's holding them back is Dale Talon. And aside from the joke, there's something there in terms of it doesn't quite work or fit. Is it the loss of Luongo? Well, you weren't going to get 60 games out of Luongo anyway, so let's not pin it on him. But there's something there that should fit better given their talent, and I don't understand why it doesn't. And that's if I was scouting the Panthers or whatever, I would probably want to look long and hard at them because I think Dale Talon is the kind of guy who, given if this continues, might get a little restless with the roster and look at some things. He's
not afraid to trade.
Yeah. And, so I always go back because we always love trade rumors in Toronto and who's a good right D on Florida, right? Figure it out. I mean, that's how these things start. Someone's falling, who's a logical candidate that could be going out, and you can play logical options and talk about it that way. But Talon might make a move and I wouldn't be surprised.
One last thing, because I posted a rumor regarding Panarin and a couple teams that are, maybe touching base with Columbus on, his availability. Again, I don't know. Right now, Columbus is. I mean, remember, it's 8 games into the season. So where they are on the outside looking in, they're only out of the playoff picture by 2 points. So it really doesn't matter right now. And most teams are not going to be making any kind of deals until at least American Thanksgiving, and then maybe moving forward toward the deadline on February 25th. Columbus is getting Seth Jones back, so that's a big add. They've been without him since training camp, but Columbus right now, I look at them, Russ, and they're the great mystery because it's not just Panarin who's in limbo; it's Bobrovsky.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, if I'm in Jarmo Kekalainen's place, how you can say I'm going to throw caution to the wind and keep both these guys and try to win the Stanley Cup and then let them walk for nothing. You cannot, if you're an organization like Columbus, let players of that ilk walk away for nothing.
Well, play may dictate him not doing that, and it's not all on John Tortorella to sort of overcome this, but we did talk about this preseason that it just does seem to affect the team. And again, players will not talk about it. Nobody's going to know for sure. But we're going to make the leap of faith that if Columbus doesn't have a good season here to start, that the availability of their 2 stars going forward in the future, they're really their 2 best players, is a big deal. I mean, there is no way around it.
Peter, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. I just pulled up their roster and I was just sort of looking at it and go, yeah, there's a big challenge there. And what do you do with that? You can't let Panarin go for nothing. Like, you just can't. So, like, how do you stick handle that one? Who's going to want him? So someone's going to have cap space and an asset to give back, because let's look at him now. So he's a left wing, so he's not a center.
Right.
But I mean, it costs the Jets for Paul Stastny a first rounder, Eric Foley, and a conditional 4th.
Sure.
Panarin is going to be more than that.
Yes.
Right. So, and then and you're going to have to, I mean, prorate $6 million, you can fit that in some ways. You can find a way to do that. Like, there's a way, by a trade deadline, but they're not going to give him away.
No.
And there should be a bidding war for him, because that's the kind of player that you throw that onto your team coming down the stretch. You do it right and you understand your analysis. That's a major difference maker.
Right. But and you just said it. First of all, his salary is $6 million. So it only makes sense for a team that is a contender, a Stanley Cup contender, who's got the room to fit that salary in their structure for 1 year. Now, a team might be willing to give up more if they think they can get him signed before July the 1st, and they have that window in between the end of the season and July 1 to get him signed. But more than likely, the price that Kekalainen's going to get back is a rental price. And the most that he'll get is the usual first-round pick, top prospect, and maybe an NHL player. So
yeah, he could do something with that. It's just that he's going to have to wait on the timing of it. And like I said, I me, if I were in charge, the hope would have been to bank a certain amount of regular season wins. So I feel like we can get to the playoffs, even if I trade this guy, one of them. You can't trade Bob. There's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah.
Right.
But, getting out slow makes it harder to do that. So unless they catch fire at some point, they're really in a bind.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking, and just on the top, just looking at the East, New Jersey, I don't know if they're a contender for the Cup, but they have the cap space. Toronto does for 1 year. Tampa, I'm not sure they have the room anymore after signing Kucherov. Boston, so in the East, I just listed 3, maybe 4 teams, and I'm sure there are ones in the West as well, but this is all under the scenario of a rental and not going forward with them. So
right.
It'll be interesting. Like I said, February 25th is the deadline, and I'd be surprised if Panarin is a Blue Jacket on February 26th. But I
don't know. We probably won't even know what's going on until the 24th. Honestly,
you think they don't push it to the end?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good show, guys. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.